I feel like it went well. That's my general feeling from the feedback that I received. There's like how it went for me, and there's how I think it went like as a thing that I promised to do, for people. I'm always trying to create a little bit of a sense of like wonder and engagement with something a little bit strange. I kind of want people to tilt their head and wonder like, what is going on? Or, oh, how did you even think of this? And so I feel like that was accomplished. A version of the project came to me through the Chicago Public Library, who had an artist in residency program that they were putting out calls for. And so I decided I wanted to create a boat that could read the water, to think about this relationship between water and lands, and that I would paddle it along the lake, in the canals, like down the Chicago River, downtown, through all those old neighborhoods, and see what kind of data the boat could gather. And it would be a research project, and it seemed to fit really well with what they might be looking for. So I proposed it, and then 2 months later, everything shut down because of COVID. When I was at Sierra Nevada College doing the fine arts residency program, when we go there, and I think for like 10 days or something, was intensive teaching. It almost feels like an extended workshop, but the courses happen, and then they fly out to all their respective homes and do their work in their own locations, but they have sort of like a distance learning kind of situation. Anyway, long story short, I was talking with Karen about this project, and she was really taken by the idea of turning the boat into an instrument, and I think became a champion of the project and of me doing the project, and early on gave me a contribution of her own volition to say, like, I hope that this can help support this idea and help bring it into reality.
This is something that 5 years ago, Walter began talking to me over a lunch table about while we were in a residency program at SNC, Sierra Nevada University up on Lake Tahoe. And it's been such an incredible dream to get to watch this come to life. And I am so grateful to all of you for being a part of this, because it's magic.
So it felt really good to have someone believe in the piece and to support it in that way. And I remember just kind of keeping that support and that idea in my back pocket as I worked on other things, thinking at some point it'll be time to do this work. And Karen, being who she is,
everything is possible because you are here. You are the most important part of a performance taking place.
Found a way to really like uplift the project and make it possible, and through Subcircle, and their support has been really amazing. And so I've had the opportunity now to think about it, to dream about it, to actually start building and to work on it, to get into 3D printing and to learn what it takes to iterate in this way. This xylophone is actually from a Chicago Public Schools table. That's why you can see all the marks and little etchings of people's names. This is the actual very first phono harp that I built in 2001. It's like a record of my conversation with wood as a woodworker, because there's so many things about it that are really rough, and there are certain aesthetic flourishes that I think continue to this day, but there's also, like, you can see my craft build over time. When I got, maybe 15 years down the line, I thought, well, what if I actually take some time and think about how I could make this thing beautiful? Because I feel like if you make something beautifully, it tends to work beautifully as well, because, you're putting in that same amount of, like, a kind of thoughtfulness and care. But it's still, it goes everywhere I go. Actually, I'll install this is the battery. So I want to put it in the back hatch, And I actually don't think I've tested to see if it fits yet. So, and then I want to run an extension cord along the outside of the boat and then into the front hatch so I can plug the radio transmitter in. I've already drilled like 25 holes in this boat, and I still feel kind of weird every time I have to put a drill through the hull. When you talked about drilling the first hole, it reminded me of the first phonoharp that I built out of a Technics 1200 turntable. And that was like the industry standard DJ turntable, the one I'd been saving up for. I'd always built phonoharps out of turntables that I'd found at flea markets that were in disrepair. Those were easy to cut up. But here I had this turntable that I'd spent a lot of money on and was really valuable to me, and I had to make the decision to cut it apart. It would be irreparable. But I remember the decision to do that led to an instrument that I ended up then performing with all over the place, and it was like just the beginning of like a whole new set of possibilities through this act that somebody could think of as destructive. And so I think, although not consciously, when I drilled the first hole in the boat, I have this, it feels like the wrong thing to do, but you realize that you're pushing through into like a new set of possibilities, so you just do it and then go from there. It's interesting because it's related to a lot of my past work in that I'm interested in natural systems. I'm interested in things being slightly unpredictable. I'm not out here to manufacture a result. I'm more interested in creating the parameters for a particular experience and then going into that experience and then finding out what happens. And so like the audience and me learn about this particular moment at the same time. And then you can think about it afterwards and analyze it afterwards and pull this data from it afterwards. Or not, or just feel about it afterwards,
We think about things as being animate or inanimate. And when you think of them as animate, you respond to them differently. And I know that part of what really drew me to this project when you first started talking about it was the way that you were talking about wanting to know the water as being a unique body of water.
Yeah, I think maybe that earlier conversation that we had was around Robin Wall Kimmerer's work, Dr. Kimmerer, and this idea of the language of animacy. The language was a language of relation rather than a language of thingification. How would you respond if your grandmother was making cookies in the kitchen and someone said, "Oh, look, it's making cookies in the kitchen"? It would be offensive. Dr. Kimmerer talks about one word that she struck upon that meant to be a bay. The idea of a bay or a harbor, it's a non-living entity. It's classified, it's a thing, it's an it. Anybody who stood at the edge of a bay understands that there is this water lapping at your feet. There are beings within the water moving away. There's the influence of the wind on the tides. There's the sustenance that it creates for the landscape and for the vegetation around the space. It's alive. So the bay is being. And so when I was reading that passage, I was thinking about, like, what does it mean to be in relation with a bay, with a body of water, and how do we have a conversation with it? How do we receive some of those voices? And then what can we learn from that?
So yeah, it's been really nice to step into this project, and I just turned 50. So I'm learning like how to weld, I'm learning how to 3D print. I finished a major public art commission and received a new one, like all within this same year. I wasn't expecting 50 to be the year where I started to like climb again, where I started to learn a bunch of new things. And it feels really nice that this project is part of, like a personal growth rather than just an artistic one. Sometimes it so happens that I can't be building like far in advance of a thing that I'm dreaming about doing. It's really helpful to have a deadline, to have a date on the calendar that you're working backwards from, and you realize like, oh, I have to get this done so that by this date I can be doing this, so that by this date I can actually share the piece. Probably for the last 6 months, I've been building, prototyping, printing, iterating, doing small-scale testing. And only for the past month or so, maybe 5 weeks ago, I put it in the water for the first time, and then was able to learn from that experience and then come back and build this thing. And then once I got that built, I felt that was time to go back to the water again, so I did a secondary test. And then I was reflecting on what I could do next and working on that, and then that's when you all arrived. So yesterday we did a third outing. The circuitry seems to not be able to deal with either a little bit of moisture or perhaps the heat. Something's going on in there, or maybe the heat's affecting the voltage of the battery output. So I wasn't able to reset it in any way that worked, so I just shut it down. And I think I'm going to revisit this control box. But it was a nice discovery that I could just flip these out of the way and then deploy them when I want to. I've opened up a couple keyboards in my day, and one thing I've noticed is, like, if you had, I don't know how many notes a big keyboard has, like 60 or 88, that would be a lot of switches and wiring, and so they end up doing it through this particular system where you just have a kind of matrix, and the wiring ends up being much more simple. They're wired together in a matrix whereby if you're connected to one of these wires, then you have 8 different notes. And if you connect to a different one of these wires, you have another 8 notes. So I've used the breadboard and I hooked the wires up to 5 different sections of the breadboard. And then depending on where I hook in the other connections of the switches, I'll get different notes. So I just pushed them all in there actually kind of randomly because I ended up feeling like it was more within the spirit of the project. And it also sounds better musically when the wind is playing it because it's making these beautiful octave jumps and, playing these notes that feel a little bit less expected. And if it was, more organized, I think it would feel less interesting on the water.
All right, so I think we'll get started. Presenting Rekodi Maji has been a 2-year-long collaboration between Subcircle, Walter Kitundu, and Monkey House, an incredible arts nonprofit in Malden, Mass, that connects communities through choreography.
So I'm here to talk to you about Rekodi Maji, which is a project that I'll be bringing to Biddeford Pool in a few weeks. And the name is Kiswahili for Record the Water. And this is from an earlier conversation that I had with Water when I was invited to create a piece connected to the ocean at the Headland Center for the Arts in California. I had kind of in the back of my mind the idea that I wanted to do an ocean-powered instrument, something you could put into the waves and it would be activated by the power of the waves. The waves would come in, turn this main wheel, which would turn a pulley system, operate a camshaft, and pump an accordion up and down. And the other part of the shaft would turn and operate a pump, which would pump air into a melodica. And because of the ocean breeze, it would spin this anemometer type device, which would play an old 78 player with an acoustic bell. So I could play records while I was up there too. I think this artwork was an example of putting your questions out into the world and then listening for the responses. And I think Rekodi Maji is very much in that lineage. I've turned this kayak, this was before I started drilling holes into it, into a sort of musical and scientific instrument. I've adorned it with strings and flutes and other instruments that are meant to be played by the water and the wind. This is a glimpse at some of the early water flute experiments I did. There's 6 flutes that are actually inside the front hatch of the kayak that are driven by rising water in the outriggers attached to the deck.
These clip on, we take them off for transport just so they don't get broken off. I had a whole section of the boat anchored to the back, and then I took it out into the lawn because I needed to move some stuff around. And as I was walking out of the door, I got like 4 steps out and I heard this, and I looked back and it had just been like shattered on the door sill. I think that's also the joy of learning how to do 3D printing, because I was able to reprint the piece when need be. But anyway, this connects here, and then as the water level rises and falls in here, it forces air through this tube into this manifold, which splits it. And then I can control how much air goes to which flute, because each of these tubes pumps air into the body and into one of these flutes. And these are all flutes that I printed, and they're at different lengths, and they just sit down in there. I think some of the lower frequencies are on the other side. Turn them all on. I would use the word tension, but it feels like it's like a negative word, but it isn't. It's an interplay, yeah, this like I'm in the boat, so I'm a factor. Just the things that I do to stay upright are gonna create sound. People are on the shore, so they're gonna be witnessing something. I feel like I have to take care of their experience a little bit, so I'm thinking compositionally. So do I just activate one flute initially? So there's a kind of like whispering single tone that begins to build and then becomes more complex. How much can I shape the experience? The other aspect of it is that I can easily just swivel my hips as I'm paddling or tilt the boat, knowing that that's going to strum one of the strings and contribute that sound to the piece. And I think in testing, I was doing a lot of that. I was activating the boat, trying to get the thing to work so I could see what worked and what didn't work. The more I spend time with the boat and the more I am in relation to the water, I realized that what I would like to do for the performance, in large part, is to focus on taking a particular journey and let the physical responses that I make be about taking that journey, staying balanced, moving forward, cresting a wave, doing whatever it is that I need to do in order to do that, and then have the output of that sound be a little bit independent of this separate focus that I have, because I want the boat to be reading and collecting the kind of data of the experience without being too influenced by me. I think when the people are there, the tension is, how do I think aesthetically about or compositionally about this moment? And is it a performance? Is it a demonstration of a research opportunity? I've been going back and forth on this quite a bit, and I think it's going to be a mix of the two. I think about the relationships that I have with places and also with people that I've met in the past who have a kind of like insight into a certain phenomena or a certain bird or something that is so deep that when you watch them looking at the thing, you can't help but become changed in the way that you perceive the thing as well. There was an artist named Bob Miller at the Exploratorium who used to do a light walk. He would walk people outside and show them like all the phenomena around light and shadow.
Now here's some nice ones. See the shadows of the trees here on the ground. Well, if you use a white board, they show up a lot better. And it's kind of fun. You can't have a shadow without having some light.
Show them what light does when it goes through your fingers, through the trees, how you can reconstitute the dappled light of the trees back into an image of the branches, and like all this really beautiful stuff. And every time people walked with Bob Miller, their sense of light and shadow would be changed like for life.
As we let the light go through the holes, each one of those spots of light resolves into a round image of the sun, independent of the shape of the hole.
And so my lofty goal for this is that I'm out here creating an instrument to observe and to pay attention in the ways that feel natural to me. Like I want to go out and ask these questions of the water. And my hope is that there will be certain things that people might notice or begin to pay attention to. The confluence of like the wind and the light, or a particular way that the water interacts with part of the shore that perhaps they've never noticed before, but because I'm taking this particular, endeavoring to do this thing, they might pay attention to their environment in a slightly different way. I think that's a really big part of my practice, is wanting people to just expand a little bit what they might consider possible or plausible. Birdwatching for me is that it's again about being in relation to a natural system, and I've learned so much from birds from the last 20 years of photographing them. Like I'm very interested in close observation over time and what can be learned from it, and I feel like my art practice is an example of that, and birding is like epitomizes that. all these aspects of the environment that I might not have noticed on my own, but because I was watching a bird take advantage of them, they taught me the value of these different things. So I consider them my teachers. And I also think that there are these gifts that happen when you're patient and you just observe and you let things unfold. The possibility of the most spectacular thing you've ever seen happening is never zero. Like, it's always possible. I look up in the sky to get grounded. You know, I spend time with the birds, and it makes me feel like I'm peering into the way things are actually supposed to be. Because they're not concerned about like finances or, you know, social media or anything else. Like, they're working on surviving every day, and they're navigating this balance between like intake of food, you know, like support for their kids, like output of energy, and they do it in really beautiful ways. And I feel like if I'm tapped into that, or I'm thinking about how to position myself within the environment, and I'm in relationship to that, then I'm connected to like one of the core threads of what it means to be alive. So the birds also got me to start noticing plants and rocks and to start looking even more closely. So I got into macro photography, and I learned that my seemingly quiet little backyard is a universe unto itself. Even one plant can host a whole series of dramas. So the image on the left is an ant getting a drop of honeydew from an aphid that they're tending and protecting. And on the right is a calligrapher fly. And now I begin to understand that all of these things are connected, that the world is a kind of web, and you can follow your questions from a stone to a butterfly, to a sunrise, to a hawk, and gain a particular understanding of the world. So you can either try to go out and get information, which is perhaps a Western approach, or you can think about receiving it. And when I step outside, I try to be open to receiving the lessons of that particular moment. So that sort of noticing, that like level of keying into the nature of a particular environment, reading the room, is what I'm after, because it feels like it gives me insight into how the world actually functions and how it actually works. And the project that I'm bringing to Biddeford Pool is also a way of reading the room. It's a way of introducing myself to you and to the harbor, and it's a way of receiving the lessons of the moment. These are classical acoustic guitar strings. So a silver wound nylon. So these are strung right into the side of the boat, and then it uses the hull as like a resonant body.
And this project,
there we go.
it's set up in a particular way. One, it needed to work, so that's like a particular constraint. But at the same time, I wanted the sounds to be legible, and I also wanted them to be decipherable. I talk a lot about the stars in the sky. When people looked up early on, and you can look up and just see, you know, a million billion stars, but it takes time and sort of repetition and experience and storytelling for constellations to form. It takes associations for stories to be told. It takes journeys for the stars to begin to register themselves in people's lives as useful. So over time and over experience, the stories become clear, and they're deciphered out of what initially seems like a million billion stars.
And then you end up with star charts, and people begin to orient themselves to the sky. And so all of the data has been there since the beginning, but the interpretation of it is just something that takes time and maybe takes generations. I was imagining that so much of this boat would be activated by speed or rough conditions, but there's something nice about it responding so well to just very gradual. And yesterday, slow movements. I was doing slow turns underneath a bridge. And when I listened to the recording, I know the exact moment when I started doing that, because the nature of the sounds changed entirely. So I'm starting to read the stars, and it feels like this work is another example of trying to just populate the sky and then see what we can do, like what kind of stories we can tell afterwards. it's not practical at all to make to make something like this. I think that's the gift of being an artist, is like you can go into this realm of impracticality. You can take the long way around because there's good stuff to find there. There's good experiences to be had, and there's things to learn. This is a very long-winded way of saying I'm seeking to be in relation to place. And if my way of being in relation to a place has an impact on the way other people see the place where they live, then I feel like that's like a net good, you know? And I feel like once we start being in relation to something, it changes the way we make decisions about how we interact with those things. I feel like an expanded sensitivity to the places where we are, like, benefits not just us, but the places themselves. So that's my lofty underlying goal to the research project. And then the other thing is just doing something that's kind of weird and wondrous and getting people to ask questions. I've been noticing that I've been asking my artwork to create the conditions for me to live the life that I aspire to live. Like, I want to be the kind of person that takes a kayak to Biddeford Pool and paddles around on the coastline. I'm not that person, but if I ask my artwork to set up the conditions for me to do that as part of a project, then I have to go out and get in a boat and go out onto the ocean. And so I end up living the life that I would wish for myself, because now I have to, because I told people I would do it, and I built the project, so I have to go and do it. So it's a way of kind of letting the art lead and letting the questions lead, so that I can sort of step into them and then have these experiences and live the life that I would hope to. And it's nice to have the opportunity to have art do that for you. If I can even approach in anything that I do, or the parameters that I set up for any sort of performance or installation or event, if I can even approach the kind of sense of possibility and magic that happens like every day in these natural spaces, then I feel like, I've really done something, you know.